Are you curious what a buy down is and maybe how it can help you in today's market to save thousands of dollars? Well, stay tuned because I have a really good friend from Element Mortgage that's going to share with you the benefits of a buy down, not only for a home buyer right now, but also how it can be used as a tool for a home seller. So stay tuned and check out this great information we put together for you. Hey, aloha, Christine Dugan here, and I am with my good friend Mina from Element Mortgage, and we're going to talk to you, buyers, about what it looks like to save some money and get your interest rate down in today's market. And this is getting recorded in September of 2023. So we're talking about, Mina, you're the expert in this. What are rates today? Let's just throw a number out there.
Mid sevens.
Okay, mid sevens. We're talking about mid sevens. So, Mina, is there a way that people can get their rate down to mid fives right now?
There is. I'm glad you asked. No, but you started this with buyers. This is actually a great strategy for sellers too. So there's a little bit of a pro for everybody involved in the transaction, and I think it's a great product that's available for everyone.
Okay, so
yeah,
do the big reveal. What are we talking about right now?
So we're talking about buy downs. Okay, I think that there's two types of buy downs. There's the permanent buy down, which I think most people are familiar with. And then there's the temporary buy down, which is something that's honestly been around for quite some time. It's just gone away because we haven't needed it as a product and it's kind of made a comeback. So what is a buy down to begin with? Regardless of the type, it's money paid up front at closing to buy your interest rate down. Permanent buy down, just like it sounds, it's buying down your interest rate permanently. Anyone can pay for that, the buyer and seller. And it's basically, the best way to describe it is you're prepaying for a certain interest rate at one time at closing, and you get that lower interest rate for the life of your loan. The biggest, I guess, benefit for that one is that you can qualify for a little bit more because you're permanently buying down the rate. Therefore, your payment's permanently going to be lower. Feature.
So I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Sounds like the permanent buy down. Like, let's say someone has a bunch of money sitting in the bank, but maybe they don't make as much money as they'd like when it comes to maybe their monthly income or annual income. Would a permanent buy down be a good option for them to put a chunk of money down to then get their rate lower that would match them? And it sounds like maybe qualify for more based off their monthly annual income. Would that be a good option?
Right. So let's say for a conventional loan, your maximum debt to income ratio is 50%. You find a home, you're at 51% at the current interest rate. And I say, okay, Sally Sue, if you put $2,000 in points towards your buy down for the interest rate, we can take it from a 7% to a 6.75, and that'll give us that 1% back from your debt to income ratio and get you within qualifying range, right? So it's in those scenarios where you're really on the cusp of qualifying versus not. Another great example is property taxes. Here in Hawaii, property taxes are assessed annually upfront. You have to qualify based on whatever the current property taxes are for that reason. And so if you're buying it as a primary residence, but the owner, current seller, is occupying it as a rental property, for instance, their property taxes are higher. And so we know your property taxes are going to go down, but they're not lower at the moment. And so it's very like property to property specific in that sense. And it's very common for me to get multiple emails with property like specific, hey, Mina, here's the address. Does this work, when you're on the fence like that? And so buying down the rate in that sense permanently is probably one of the kind of first go-to options that I'm going to look at. But there's a couple other like creative things we can look at as well.
Awesome.
Cool. Temporary buy down. I'm not going to spend too much time on the permanent just because I think most people are more familiar with it. It's more straightforward, I should say, not more familiar. But temporary buy down is, you've got a couple options. There's like a 1-1, a 2-1, a 3-2-1. So don't get too caught up in, it's a lot easier than you think. You're basically getting, well, the biggest difference is you as the buyer cannot pay for that. So it has to come from the seller as a credit if you're going with the temporary buy down. So those numbers that I just spit out is how many years you have a lower interest rate. Let's just take 321 for example. Let's say the actual interest rate today is 7%. Then if you have enough seller credits to pay for the temporary buy down for the 321 buy down, year one, you're going to be at 4%.
Mm-hmm.
Then year two, you'll be at 5%. Year three, you're going to be at 6%. And then year four, all the way to 30, you're going to be at that 7%.
Okay, so just so I could understand,
Am I
because you said
thoroughly
this
confused you
magic,
yet?
no, you said a magic number that I feel like it was the number everybody loved their interest rate at was 4%.
4%.
So you're
Yeah.
saying there's still a way for that to happen. And the seller, not the buyer, the seller can use it either as a tool to like get buyers to look at their property because more buyers would probably qualify at a 4% rate than other properties. But that might be something to help a buyer buy someone's property, or a buyer uses that and they get a little bit of a break in their interest rate for a couple of years.
Yes and no. One of the differences between the permanent and temporary, because your rate's going to go up to that 7% again, eventually, you have to qualify based on that higher rate.
Okay, so you have to
But
qualify. Yeah.
yes.
All right.
Couple of benefits, or I should say, like good candidates for the temporary buy down is one, most people think interest rates are going to be coming down in the next year or two. So it basically gives you temporary relief on that payment until it's time to refinance. Again, not a guarantee, just something that's out there that a lot of people think is going to happen. A cool feature with the temporary buy down is, let's say you're getting a $30,000 seller credit to put towards that buy down, and you've gone through year one and then halfway through year two, and it's time to refinance. You've used up, making this up, but let's say you've used up 20 of that 30,000. 10,000 goes towards a principal reduction. So you don't lose that. On a permanent buy down, you do lose that. And so there's a little bit different features with each product that you would want to get educated on and ask questions on and really try to understand in order to make a good decision.
So really what I hear from you is they just need to talk to you because you know those differences and you can give advice.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the seller credit's really the big thing, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's
Like,
a huge tool to use in today's market when rates
it
are
is. And
higher. Yeah.
some listings say it out there bold. Seller willing to give a $10,000 credit, $20,000 credit for full priced offer, whatever, right? Like we need to know kind of what we're working with. We can always ask, but identifying if a seller credit is even possible, and then from there drilling down to see like how much of a seller credit we can get will really easily like help us to determine which one is going to be a better product.
Yeah, and with different loan types, there's probably limits to the amount of money the seller credit can be provided, right? Like percentage of loans.
So there is, good question. There is a maximum seller credit, or I should say interested party contribution is what it's called, an IPC, and that could include the realtor, it could include the seller. The maximum numbers don't apply to the temporary buy down.
Ooh, isn't that nice? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
So, couple of other kind of good candidates for the temporary buy down program is, let's say you are anticipating a promotion in the near future, but you don't make that income yet. It's pretty much a sure thing. I have some buyers who are anticipating or are becoming eligible for bonuses at their companies that they don't have right now. And so it's like a short-term relief for people. Some people are even like, oh, that's great. Like I can save $900 a month and I'm going to buy some furniture. It'll make me feel better about spending money on furniture even or appliances, right? So it's a pretty flexible product to qualify for. It's just a question of can we get the seller credits needed to do that program.
And is this only, can this only be applied to a certain type of buyer, or can investors use this?
The permanent buy down is eligible for any type of occupancy, primary residence, investment, second home. The temporary buy down is limited to only those that are going to be occupying as their primary residence.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I did get a couple of visuals together for you guys just because I'm a visual person too, and it's a little bit easier, especially when you're talking about numbers, to see it. I did mention at the beginning of this that it's not just for buyers in terms of benefits for the buy downs. So I'm just going to pull up a visual for you guys so that you can see how this works. So for the permanent buy down, on the left column, you have traditional, which is an $875,000 purchase price, 20% down. I'm going to go ahead and make a plug here. If you're purchasing your primary residence, you do not need to put 20% down. But back to this. So loan amount is 700,000. This is for a conventional loan. Your starting rate is 7.5, and your payment is $4,895. Skipping to the next column, seller, property might be sitting for a little bit. Maybe it was priced high and they're contemplating a price reduction of $40,000. So that would bring the purchase price down to $835,000, 20% down. Your new loan amount is $668,000. At that same interest rate, your payment is now $224 less. So if you look over in the third column, you take that 40,000 price reduction and you apply it to a permanent rate buy down. We've now just bought, so same purchase price, 875 as the first scenario, 20% down, loan amount still 700. And let's say that 40,000 bought my interest rate down to 1% down to a 6.5%. Now my monthly payment's $4,424, which is a $471 savings. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is for the seller, it's the same net result for the most part. There's going to be some slight tweaks with closing costs and things like that at a higher price, but the seller is able to maintain the higher price, and the buyer is able to have a lower monthly payment than they would have with the price reduction. Does that
So
make
that sounds
sense?
kind of like a win-win. Like the
It
seller
does
gets
sound like a
what they
win-win.
want, buyer gets what they want. So I mean that's kind of beneficial for both parties.
Yep. And just to go a little further as far as the seller benefits, maybe it makes sense to just give them a $30,000 credit. You're now netting $100 or $10,000 more, and yet the buyer is still able to save more money than your original 40,000 price reduction, right? So if you're an agent, you need to be working with your lender. If you're a buyer, you need to be working with your lender to see what's possible on the specific properties. But communication is key, right? So just trying to figure out and having everybody in a win-win situation, right? Okay, so then to show a visual of the temporary buy down, this one's pretty simple. You've got this is an example of a 2-1 buy down. So having a lower interest rate for the first 2 years. If your starting rate is 7.5%, in year 1, you're at 5.5. Year 2, you're at 6.5. Year 3 through 30, you're at 7.5. The monthly payment differences, so you're saving $920 a month for the first year, $471 a month for the second year. So again, I think the kicker or the biggest benefit point on this program is you don't lose that money. If you do end up refinancing or selling or paying off the loan for any reason, you actually get to keep that money as a principal reduction.
Which is
So
awesome because I don't think I even knew that it's like, let's say like 1 year from now rates drop and they can refi out, that credit goes still towards the property, which is, I mean, that is a win-win for them.
now let's get really nerdy. Okay, we're looking at 4 scenarios now, and it's just really to compare side by side what the permanent or temporary buy down could do and the implications are for each party, buyer and seller. So you've got that same traditional scenario on the left-hand side. That's kind of our baseline. Then the second column, seller decides to do a 40K price reduction. To you as the buyer, you're $224 less per month on your monthly payment. The cost to the seller was $40,000 to reduce their price, and the life of the loan savings for you as the buyer was $80,000. The permanent rate buy down, using that 40K to buy the rate down 1% to 6.5%. And your monthly payment savings is now $471 less. But for the life of the loan, it's pretty much doubled your savings.
Mm-hmm.
I will caveat this by saying the average person doesn't keep their loan for more than 5 to 7 years. And particularly in a market that we're in right now, with interest rates supposedly coming down, it's probably going to be even shorter than that. So you're still saving your $471 per month in this scenario until that time comes, if it comes. And then the last column is for the temporary rate buy down. It's the 2-1 again. So first year you're at 5.5, second year 6.5, third year 7.5 for the rest of the life of the loan. You're saving $920 per month for the first year, $471 for the second year, and back to the starting rate of 7.5 for the third year. So you're not getting the same savings as you were seeing with the previous ones because it's a temporary thing. You're only realizing those savings when you're having the lower interest rate in year 1 and 2, which is why, again, this is great for people who are expecting higher incomes or just want the temporary relief because rates are so high right now. And look at the difference between the cost to the seller in all of these scenarios. So the net, like as a seller, if you're thinking about reducing your price and you're having that conversation with your realtor and they're like, we probably need to reduce the cost by about 50,000. Whatever lender contact you have, speak to them because these types of scenarios, or there's a program that we use called Mortgage Coach that's a great visual even for sellers to say, okay, here's your different options if you take a 50K price reduction versus giving the buyer a $20,000 credit, right? Yeah, I mean, these are all just in today's market, we have to get creative and we're trying to access and take advantage of whatever programs there are out there, even if it's just for temporary relief, because that's really what we're looking for at the moment. Home prices, if they continue to go up, rates have to come down just from an affordability standpoint. And so if you can get in now, and this is back to our first conversation about like, why is it not a bad time to buy right now? If home prices continue to go up, like, how do I put this? If you're looking at a $700,000 home today and the rate is 7.5%, and you're like, you know what, Mina, I want to wait until rates come down. And 2 years from now, that home is now $800,000 and your rate is 6.5. Great. The rate's lower. Well, guess what? Your payment hasn't changed, or maybe even be higher, right? And so those are kind of the things that are really, they're not so tangible and it's not in your face and it's something that's you'll realize in the future. And so it's a lot harder for people to grasp that concept, but it's certainly something to think about.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed that out, and I like that you get so nerdy with the numbers because at the end of the day, like you do this all day long, and you can calculate all the numbers to help make sense to people, whether they're buying or selling, like how this is going
Right.
to be most relevant in today's market based off people's goals. Because that's really at the end of the day, whatever people are looking to do. And I love that you pointed out because appreciation is not going away. And depending on the market, the appreciation, it's like, is it a 4% appreciation year or is it a 8% appreciation?
Exactly.
Because that's how it is in Hawaii.
Exactly.
We're different than the rest of the country. So those are great points that you shared with us today, Mina. I appreciate your time and your effort with all of
You're
it.
welcome.
And you guys, if you got questions about the numbers with mortgages, give Mina a call.
Thank you. Aloha.
Stay. Aloha.